Mr Assistant Speaker.
16 years.
Thank you very much, Mr Assistant Speaker. I rise this evening to speak on the Law Enforcement Powers and Responsibility Amendment Kings Cross and Railways Drug Detection Bill 2012. And as has been mentioned, I'm sure you will may have predicted that we stand with the much maligned civil libertarians. We stand for individual liberty, and we believe that when it comes to civil liberties, that this bill is moving in the wrong direction. The bill will authorise the use of sniffer dogs without a warrant for drug detection in a defined area in Kings Cross. It also adds train lines to the area where the dogs can operate, meaning that they will now have access to the entire City Rail network. A range of different schedules are amended. In particular, the range of persons are covered, and that's now broadened in this proposed bill. The schedule has also amended, which allows a search by sniffer dogs without warrant, in particular in Kings Cross and on the network, as I mentioned. And it also has a very broad definition of a public place, and it's worth discussing that. A place whether or not covered by water or part of premises that is open to the public or is used by the public, whether or not on payment of money or other consideration, whether or not the place or part is ordinarily so open or used, and whether or not the public to whom it is open consists only of a limited class of persons in a road or a road-related area, but does not include a school. It's an incredibly wide area, a wide definition for what is a public place. And of course, that's important because we know a lot about the history of sniffer dogs in Sydney and in New South Wales, and we also know that this is part of the government's plan to clean up, so-called clean up Kings Cross. According to the press release on this matter, quote, Mr O'Farrell said the government was determined to clean up Kings Cross and the tough measures announced today should sound alarm bells for thugs and hooligans. Well, they're great intentions and they sends a very positive message, but the substance, unfortunately, doesn't measure up to the announcement. And of course, this was triggered by the very tragic death of Mr Thomas Kelly after he was assaulted and died after being hit by a stranger in the street in Kings Cross. Now, what's not surprising is that the Hotels Association have come out supporting this, as they believe it's unlikely, of course, to affect their bottom lines. Patrons can still continue to drink beyond the point of intoxication at bars and hotels while they're reaping the financial rewards of that. But what is clear is that, according to the Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research, there has been a decline in the rates of assault in Kings Cross over the last 5 years. And the question that I'll be posing today is evidence. There's no clear evidence that existing assault rates are linked to drugs. And the concern is that this legislation will only marginalise people, in particular young people, and those people that use the public transport system. I welcome the example from the member for Mole Lakes. She said, well, there's this chain. If you arrest someone lower down, then you arrest someone higher up. Well, let's see the evidence for that. I would welcome the government presenting evidence on how many convictions for supply that the government has achieved as a result of sniffer dogs, because what we know is that 80% of sniffer dog searches resulted in false positives. We know that 4 out of 5 times the sniffer dogs get it wrong. And we know that because of the Auditor General's report, but we also know it because of recent stories, for example, in the Sydney Morning Herald, which said, for example, quote, that figures obtained from state government in response to parliamentary questions from David Shoebridge, a member of the Upper House, noted that 14,102 searches were conducted after a dog sat next to a person, indicating they might be carrying drugs. In 11,248 cases, no drugs were found. So these people are being ritually sat down, they're having all their possessions gone through, their privacy intruded upon, just because that citizen is going about their normal business and not engaging in any illegal activity. So if the sniffer dogs worked, even on the government's own arguments, if it worked and it was effective and didn't have so many false positives, I could understand the government's argument. But the evidence demonstrates that that is not the case. That the drug detection dogs, while it's argued that they're taking place in some kind of harm minimisation strategy, they're not reducing the transportation of drugs for supply. What they're doing is they're 80% of the time getting it wrong, engaging in false positives, and actually picking up the occasional personal user. Because the minister even highlighted that. The attorney's second reading speech acknowledged the fact the numbers on dog detection program is a failure. He said, quote, the government does not judge the effectiveness of drug detection dogs based solely on the apprehension of drug traffickers. He refers here to the deterrence function of these dogs, but there's no evidence that that is any better than basic policing. We're big supporters of basic policing, high-profile basic policing, policing being out on the beat, having a dog, sniffing people out, 80% of the time getting it wrong, wasting police time, in our view, isn't the way to deal with that. There has, however, and I should say, and I should highlight this, there has, however, been a case where there has been a situation of supply. The New South Wales Ombudsman's first report into the sniffer dog program, as it was used on trains, reported that out of more than 2,500 searches, not one trafficable amount of any drug was found. Not one. Not one trafficable amount. The attorney did identify one instance in his second reading speech where a search on a train by the dog unit uncovered a trafficable quantity of ecstasy. However, the dearth of additional examples suggests that this may have been a lucky one-off. If you search enough people over a number of years, no matter how inaccurate your reasons, you will eventually find something. So the question to the Minister is that we want the government to be able to clean up King's Cross. We want to reduce crime and assault. We want to reduce trafficking of drugs. We want all those things to happen. But is this the most effective way of implementing that policy? I noticed Charles Waterstreet in his column in the Sydney Morning Herald made the point, quote, "The herding of drug-sniffing dogs along King's Cross streets to sniff the pockets of party-going patrons instead of examining the drug ledgers, telephone records, bank records, cash counting machines and drug scales of the dealers is police bullying the most vulnerable." And that's the concern, end quote. End quote. That's the concern. That's the concern that we have, is that we believe that police time should be invested in the most effective means of policing. We believe that police time should be invested in those situations where we know that significant progress can be found. There was a report, for example, in the Sydney Morning Herald, quoting a Mr Matthew Pells of Erskineville, a hospitality student, said he was one of the many thousands who was searched in a public place and be found not to be carrying drugs. Mr Pells said a police dog sat next to him at Redfern Station before he underwent a search. When his pockets were emptied, a packet of dog treats was found. The whole thing was unnecessary, he said. I think it's a violation of my privacy. And that's the balance. And it's a really genuine and serious question. The balance about individual liberty and about people's civil liberties and about whether or not we should have these dogs, which we know get it wrong most times, so there's the evidence very clear, whether it's effective policing, whether it's an effective use of police time. It's our view that, as has been mentioned before, if you're looking to reduce hooliganism and antisocial behaviour, you have to go to the heart of the problem, which is alcohol. Alcohol is the heart of the problem in King's Cross, and the government needs to get tough to make sure that if cleaning up King's Cross and all of the areas where there's assaults and antisocial behaviour, that's something that needs to take place forthwith in a very strong way. And I note that there's been a whole range of plans. The Last Drinks campaign by those people on the front line, those people in the trade union movement, ambulance officers, police, they've got a plan, but this government hasn't sought to take that plan on. A plan which those people on the front line, the paramedics and the police and the emergency services staff, think is the best way to go forward in terms of dealing with these issues. So, Mr Assistant Speaker, I take the approach of the government seriously. I think all of us in this House care very deeply about assaults and violence and antisocial behaviour, and for anyone who's been subjected to that, it can really deeply and seriously affect somebody. And what we would like to see is a very effective, capable system of responding to that. The evidence tells us that this is not the solution. If there is evidence which the government can point to which says that it's making a real impact on the supply of drugs, let's see it. If there's evidence that the government has that says that it's more effective than basic policing, than police on the beat, let's see it. What we need to have here is evidence to support the positions that we're taking and not relying on, well, we think so, and instead having a look at what is most effective. So, Mr Temporary Speaker, I won't be supporting this proposed legislation, and I encourage the government to look more deeply at this matter, to engage in more research so we can have the most effective form of policing to stop the harmful use of drugs in our community and in particular stop supply. Thank you.
Mr Assistant Speaker.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I call the member for Tweed.
Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. I